Hey, this is Gerald Quick, and this is my week 3 and 4 project for Cocos 2D X. I will launch it in the simulator here. Now the game also has parallax scrolling, but it's done by the accelerometer, so you would actually have to compile it to the device in order to see that. But the chickens, unfortunately, are still on the front layer, so I'm going to have to make a custom parallax scrolling class in order to incorporate the chickens in the right layers like they're supposed to be. I'm waiting for the timer to run out. You can see the end game screen, which didn't get to completely finish like I wanted, but yeah, there you go. And then back to the main menu. Alright, so let's go through the code. Okay, so in the main menu, nothing really fancy. All the stuff is pretty much the defaults, with the exception of adding the sprites for the background and then the logo for the chicken. Now, I originally had an actual sprite sheet, but it wasn't where I was getting like really low frame rates, and I decided to split it up to see if that made a difference. I don't know why I thought that would help, but then I found out that okay, don't go by what the simulator says. The simulator's just simulated, so put it on the device to see the real frame rates. So on the device you get 60 frames per second. Okay, these are the buttons. Here I'm setting up the images for my play button and the quit button. And then if the play button's clicked here, we see we go ahead and push the game scene. So on my game scene, get to the top. Okay. So here I just set up my variables that I have for my spawn time for the chickens. I have a player info class that's a singleton, so I go ahead and grab the instance of that. That's used to hold the player score, misses, and hits or kills. I go ahead and set everything, set the current ammo, and then these are my object pools for the current chickens that are flying, and this is for the foreground chickens. And okay, and I have here I set up my sprites. We'll go look at that function in a second. This is my background node. It's a parallax node. It's actually a custom class that I got from the internet as far as the extras, so you can do some offsets, but I don't actually use it, so I could have just went with the default CC parallax node. Would have worked just fine. Okay, so then I add that to the scene, and then I create my background sprites. I set their speeds because the parallax node, each layer you set a speed for it, so that way when you start to scroll the background, you'll get that parallax effect. So then I also set the scale because my images don't actually meet the iPhone device, or excuse me, the iDevice. So it's kind of not a good way to do it. I hard coded it just so that way it'll fit right on the iPhone. Ideally, of course, you want to do some real math here to make sure, depending on the device that you have. Okay, these are adding the sprites, the background sprites to the background node for the parallax scrolling. This is a game logic class that I have set up. It's not complete, but I didn't get everything over to it like I wanted. So the only thing in there right now is like my GUI and the timer, and we'll look at that. I initiate my player class, and you see here I set up the ammo sprites, the reload sprite, shells. Those are the shells that actually spin after they shoot, and then I add these to the scene here. And then here in the game logic, I set up my GUI, set up the timer, and I have sprites and stuff that I have set up for that, and we'll look at that inside the class. And these are object pools that I have set up for my rotating shells. Even though the player can only fire twice before reloading, I wanted to make sure that I held enough of these shells in there in case you could shoot fast enough and reload fast enough where the shells are still falling. And I wanted to make sure that I could still instantiate, or not instantiate, but make some other objects visible so it doesn't look just ridiculous. And then here I go ahead and set the positions and the sprite and everything for the rotating shells. And this is my game object pool, or I'm sorry, this is where I create my object pools for the flying chickens. I have two. I have the actual pool that holds them, and then the current pool just holds a pointer to them and releases them as it needs to, but they still stay in the main object pool. So I'm not, requesting more memory, or I'm not creating objects and deleting objects. And this is for the score. And I'm using a font. I used a program. See if I can get out of here for a second. I'll show you the name of it. I meant to have it up. Well, I used a program for creating the fonts. It creates the bitmap fonts. So basically I take this here and I use it to create my bitmap font. And you can use that for anything, and any font in there. It's actually pretty cool. And then yeah, so then it displays my score. Here I enable the accelerometer, I enable touch, and then I schedule the update method to run. So here in the init GUI, it's just the same stuff as far as setting up the timer and making sure the sprite, I use a sprite for the actual box that holds the time value, but the time value is actually using that font from the bitmap font. Just instantiates new player. Alright, this is my spawn function for the chickens. What's going on here? Guess I'm not using it. Interesting. Okay, so I check to see. I don't want more than 4 flying at a time. If it is, then it just returns out. But if not, then I go ahead and I check my flying chicken pool and go ahead and take another chicken and add it to the current flying chicken pool. And then there's a 10% chance that a foreground chicken will spawn. And I do the same thing, just pull it, take it from the actual foreground chicken pool, and I add it to the actual current pool. It's kind of confusing. I guess I didn't have to do it that way, but I use this to see how many are currently available in my update function. This is actually creating the actual pools, the flying chicken pool and the foreground chicken pool. I just go through and create sprites and chickens. Have a chicken class, and we'll look at that. And same thing for the flying chicken pool, but then I randomly decide if it's going to be a large, medium, or small chicken, and then I default to large in case this comes back with some kind of number I'm not expecting. But set their positions. It's all temporary though, because it all gets redone when they're actually spawned. It randomly picks a height based on the screen size. And then this function is the same that's up at the top. I didn't get to finish implementing. I wanted to break it out to its separate function, but it's for setting up the background. I got a lot of cleaning up I didn't get to finish doing. Now this is setting up my sprites. Now I'm using sprite sheets, so it's pretty cool. So you add these shared sprite frame cache, and this is my foreground. It's I'm using a program called Texture Packer, and in here you can add your sprites. You can add sprites and it'll create a sprite sheet for you. So if I grabbed some chickens here, say I grab these, open them, So it makes a sprite sheet. And then you can set a bunch of stuff on it, as far as the trim and whatnot. It's actually really versatile. It's pretty cool. And then it'll auto SD for you, so you can say that you are doing something Cocos 2D for iPad, HD and SD, and it will generate a separate sheet for the iPad, the next resolution down, and then the SD resolution for the lower generation ones. But then it creates a plist and a ping. The ping is your actual sprites. So when you look here, see it made a HD and then an iPad HD and then a regular. So if you look at the ping that it generated, this is the sprite sheet that it made for with all my chickens in it. Now this is created. The reason why this is red, it says please purchase, and that's because, well, I need to purchase the app. It's kind of funny, but okay. So that's the sprite sheet, and this is the plist that it creates, and it's awesome because the plist contains the frame data. So it has dictionaries with like the frame, the offset, the exact position of where they are in sprites. So let's go back to game scene. So you see here I add these sprite sheets in the plists. I got one for GUI as well, and then I add them to the scene. And my update function here, I check the current sky position, and then I have my background scroll rate, and this is based off of the background points per second, and you will look at that, and this value I'm actually getting is actually being set from the accelerometer function that I have. Because then what I'm doing is this is bad too, I'm hard-coded some distances for my sprites. So when you tilt the device, if you're already all the way to the left for the device, it won't go anymore. So basically I'm just checking to make sure I'm not hitting my bounds. And these are numbers that worked for the iPod. So some real math needs to be done just to make sure for your device. And it's just better to make your own. I think if you're not doing a side-scrolling game like a space shooter where it doesn't really matter, where the background just scrolls infinitely, and you want to do like I'm trying to do with this one, then it's probably better just to make your own custom background scrolling class, which is not very difficult at all. Okay, so then after that, this updates the background, and then here I animate if there's any shells, any rotating shells, like if you shoot, then they are animated. I check to see if they're visible, and then I get their Y position. If they're under the screen, then go ahead and set them to false, because they're just reused. I don't destroy the objects. So all my memory allocation is done in the beginning of the game. And then here I do the update, this game logic update for this class. It's the timer, so it'll update the timer. And then I check to see if spawn time is greater than, if it's the spawn time variable is greater than 2 seconds. If it is, then I'll spawn a chicken, and then I'll reset the spawn time to 0. If not, then I will increment the spawn time by the delta time. Okay, and then I check to see if any flying chickens are dead. If they are, then I remove them from the flying chickens pool. This is the current flying chickens pool. It's not the main chicken pool. And then I check to see if the timer is empty. If it is, then I end game. And here's the end game. I go ahead and unschedule updates. I go ahead and copy the players, how many times they've missed. I copy the kills over, and this is to the singleton. And then I go ahead and push the end game screen. And this is the touch function I have here. So I check for touches, of course, get the touch. I look at see if the player's ammo is less than 0 or equal to 0. If it is, then I check to see if he's actually touching the bounding box for the reload sprite, if it contains the actual touch point. If it does, then I do the reload for the player, and then I also play the reload sound effect. If not, then I play the empty shotgun empty sound effect. And then it just keeps going. So here, if it's not any of these conditions, then it's a valid place for he can shoot. So I play the fire sound effect, and then I do some player shoot stuff here. This we'll look at it in the class, but it decrements like the ammo and all that stuff. And then I go ahead and spawn out a rotating shell. let's see what else. Anything? Okay, and then I check to see if any of the touch locations are a chicken, and if it is, then I kill the chicken, and I add a kill, and I add score points based on the chicken type, and I do it here as well. Because foreground chickens are 25 points, and then flying chickens, depending on the type, whether it's large, medium, or small, there's different point value. And let's see, here's my score stuff. Basically, it just takes the value that I pass from the chickens, and then I get a CC string, and I do it with a format the string that way, and then this is my string bitmap font score, and I go ahead and set the string. And this is the accelerometer function. I got this from the internet as well. It's very simple. These values can be tweaked here. This rest accelerator X determines how much it has to move before it starts actually taking reading the value. So I mess with that only, really. It's the only thing I actually mess with. And one thing too is that Cocos 2D X inverts the X and Y accelerometer depending on your orientation. So in landscape mode, right X is actually negative Y and Y is X. So I had to make some changes here because my game's in landscape mode. So once I get the values from the accelerometer, I get based on these things I said here also, I get a smaller value for my background points per second, and this is what's used to determine how much to scroll the background. It's a pretty cool looking effect. It'd be really cool if I would have been able to finish my own custom one, so that way the chickens are, because it really ruins it with the chickens not being embedded into the background like they should. Okay, next one. End game scene, very simple. The only thing I added here is just like a default scene, and then I just added my sprites for the game over. I guess I need to zoom in. I added my sprites for the game over, the score, the kills, and I'm pulling the values from the player info singleton that I made. Alright, this is the parallax scrolling extras that I got from the internet, from a tutorial, and like I said, I don't use any of these functions. So it's actually kind of useless. I should have just used a regular parallax node. Okay, this is my chicken class. So when you instantiate it, make sure it's not dead. And then anything normal stuff, just setting it visible, invisible, creating animations. Now this is cool. Okay, this is something to look at. Alright, so I create a new CC animation, and here I'm going, because I know there's 19 frames in my sprite sheet, and this is what's cool. Since you have the sprite sheet loaded in, I do create with format, because what I'm doing is my pings are all named MH4, right? And then there's a number, .ping. So it goes through and it grabs the name, and it grabs it from the cache based on the name, sprite frame by name, and then I do animation add sprite to the frame, and I do that. So I do that 19 times for this particular animation, which happens to be my show animation. This when the chicken comes up and brings his head up, looks around. That's how that works. And then here I set my delay per unit. So this is saying that I have 19 frames. I want it to be done in 3 seconds. So basically I take 3 seconds and divide it by the number of frames. And then here it's saying, do I want to restore it back to the original frame, which actually I should have left this as false. You might notice on some chickens in the foreground they might flicker. That's because when it's done playing, there's two different animations for show and hide. So when it shows, when it's done, it goes back to the hide, to not showing. So it's kind of messed up. I should have fixed that. But anyway, and then I have a sequence that I create. So I have the animation, and that's all this one does. It just creates the animation sequence, and then I do a function to call when it's finished. I call this show animation done, and then I retain it. Here's another sequence that's created, and this one is, what's this one for? And that's the same one, but it's the opposite, right? You see I'm going backwards. I'm starting at 19 and going to 1. I'm just reversing it and decrement it, so that way I create the hiding animation. And then the same thing, it's 3, 19, and then I retain it. Now this is for the dead, Morhun dead. So when the foreground chicken gets shot, it's only 6 frames, but I still take the same amount of time for some reason. I think I might have missed that, but it works good and looks good, so it's fine. Now the chicken class itself represents the foreground chickens. And let's see. Okay, so when a chicken dies, it plays the chicken die sound, and it's only on the foreground chickens. I didn't add it to the flying chickens when I think I overrode this function. We'll look at it when I look at the flying chicken class. Okay, so I play the sound effect, and then I check to see how many actions are running, like if there's any animations running. If it is, then I stop all actions, and then I run the die action. And that's this sequence here that was created. So when those animations are done, it calls these callbacks here. So if the show animation's done and he didn't get killed, then I just run the hide one. So he will show himself, he didn't die yet, so then he's going to run the hide. When hide's done, I set him to false. Or if he's dead, I set him to false. I don't, like I said, I don't delete any objects that are showing. So in the flying chicken class I have here, I just extended the regular chicken class, and see some differences. So the animations are a little bit different. Let's see. So I check here to see what size chicken it is, whether it's large, medium, or small. And then, okay, so in this here, I create 2 actions using the CC spawn. Create with 2 actions, and this allows both actions to run at the same time. So if you do it the other way that I had set up, it would only do it one at a time. So that's helpful. And everything else is pretty much the same. Oh goodness. Oh, sorry about that. Alright. Okay, and then the fly, basically that just runs that action, the flying one that we have saved, die. Yeah, so that's why I didn't play the sound, because I overrode the die animation because I wanted to check to run the die animation for the flying chickens is a little bit different. And I actually don't use an update on them since the move 2. Originally I tried to do it myself manually, and it's just better to just use the action shortcut to create those. Alright, player. Not much to this. Just holds information like the current ammo, current score, kills, any streaks which I didn't get to implement, misses. And let's see, so on the GUI for the player side we have like the ammo sprite, and I have the 2 shells at the bottom and the reload sprite. The animations for here are actually the animations for the reload and reload ready, so it's just switching it from one frame to the other, from green to red is what this animation does. And then I do it the other way. Like this both ways. It's from red to green and green to red. And then here is the shells. And that's it. I got a bunch of getters to get like the current ammo and any kind of streaks, whatever. Now the shoot function, it goes ahead and you know, minuses the ammo down by 1, and then it checks to see if the ammo is, you know, is less than or equal to 0, and then if so, it sets the shells visible to false, and then reload ready is true, and then the reload sprite action, it switches it from red to green. But if that's not the case, then it just go ahead and sets it to sets the visibility on the shells for false. The reload function will just set the ammo to current ammo to 2. Says that reload's not ready because you can't reload if you don't need to, and it runs the cannot reload, so it turns it from green to red, and then it sets the shells visible. And these are the shells that aren't animated, they're just static. But let's see, player misses. Okay, and that adds any misses. Resets, I haven't used it for anything, but it'll reset everything. Number of kills. And these aren't used, these callbacks. I have them set, but I didn't need them. like I was saying, this one doesn't have anywhere close to anything that it needs to have in it. It's just like I'm not even using states right now. I didn't get to do as much as I wanted. Like when you started the game, it actually told you tap to start and give you more feedback instead of just going right into the game. Maybe some instructions or something, but it doesn't do any of that. So then I set the timer. Got my update function, which is not used. And get to implement it. This is my timer. Basically, it just decrements the current time by the delta time, and then I get the string value for it and just display it. And that's all for that one, for that function. Alright, rotating shell class. Alright, this is used to display the shells that fly off after you shoot, and all it is just a set of actions. I just create the actions for the sprites, and then I don't even use, well, the update, I guess I should have deleted all that. Instead of using like a move to function, I'm just using like a parabolic, I think, or I guess that would be the word for it. Anyway, I'm using this function here. I take my y, add the velocity, times it by the current time. It's just doing a gravity, simple physics type gravity, because I tried creating a parabola using like using one of those formulas, but it didn't work out very well. So I was like, why? And plus that was a bad idea anyway. It's kind of too complicated when I could just do simple gravity. And I know they have a physics engine, but I didn't want to implement it just for these. And this was a lot easier. And that's it. And then it runs the rotate animation. So, alright, player info. This is Singleton. Not much of this one either. It's pretty simple, self-explanatory. You have a get instance function that checks to see if it exists. If it's null, if not, then it creates a new one. Excuse me. And this only happens once, of course. And then I have some functions for setting the score and the kills and misses, and it returns the kills and misses as well. Yep, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed it and check out the game. It's pretty cool. It'll be better once I can finish the background.